Waiters. What's the saddest? I'm waiting for someone you have experienced. Got sat a party of 15 to 20 for a woman's bridal shower. Her mum decorated the table and chairs and the whole corner for the party. Everyone in the restaurant could see there was going to be a party there on a busy Friday night. 4 people showed out of the possible 20. That includes the future bride and mum. I didn't even care about the money I was missing out on. 4 tables of my section gone on a busy weekend shift. I just felt so bad for her. You know it's bad when you're not even worried about your tips. Ugh, this one was tough. I worked at a pretty fancy steakhouse in town, and we had a private dining room that could seat up to 32 at a single long table. To book the room, we charged a £1,500 deposit, which we then used to cover part of the bill. It was a deposit, not a room charge. Anyways, this girl books it for 26 people, puts the deposit on her card. She shows up with her sister, and then after about 20 minutes, 2 of their friends show up and sit at the opposite end of this giant table from the birthday girl and her sister. Nobody else came. They waited an hour. The birthday girl was sobbing. The other 2 just awkwardly left. It was awful. I'm grateful to my manager, who in a moment of compassion refunded the whole deposit back onto the poor girl's card. I felt terrible for her. That's horrible. It must have meant so much to her since she was willing to splurge. I haven't bartended in a million years, but the saddest one was a guy in his 30s. He had a 2-top, asked for a bottle of top-shelf champagne, candles lit, everything. Told me they were celebrating. No one showed. Guy looked morose, but had an appetizer, poured a glass of champagne for the person who wasn't there, then asked for the bill. I felt bad he obviously got stood up. So I brought him a dessert on the house. He smiled and told me it was his anniversary. My face must have showed my sadness for him. So he clarified his wife died of cancer a few months ago. It may have been the saddest thing I've seen. The guy's had something horrible happen to him and still decided to go out and attempt to remember the good times, not dwell on the bad. You were nice to him and that probably meant a lot. His day probably sucked, but it sucked less than it could have done. Do you know what? Yeah, his day probably did suck, but that's actually really heartwarming. The fact that he still went out celebrating like the love that they shared together. Oh, that is so cute, but it is really, really sad. Not a waiter, but worked at a coffee shop for several years and made friends with tons of regulars. One of the regulars, we'll call him Jay, was working on his PhD in art history or something to that effect at the university near us. He came in one day, got his usual tea and asked if I could charge him for a latte, but make it later, no big deal. I was bussing tables and asked who the latte was for, and very excitedly expressed that he was meeting a lady and it was kind of a date. He was an awkward kind of guy, but very interesting and incredibly friendly. 1 hour passes, no show. 2 hours, no show. Finally 3. He's looking despondent and starts collecting his things and leaves. She showed up 20 minutes later asking about Jay. Apparently they got their times completely mixed up. He comes in the next day and I mentioned that she came in looking for him, and he looked so excited. I found out a week or so later from him that she basically blew him off a second time. He was so crestfallen, it broke my heart. That one was almost going well, and then no. My poor heart. This one's got me thinking, like, girl, did you really get your times mixed up? Or was that just an excuse? But then why would she even turn up to the cafe anyway? Weird. And then again for a second time, not turn up. This girl got problems. Not exactly a waiter, but I was working at a bar a few years back, and there often was this girl, in her early 20s maybe, who sometimes used to meet her mother at the bar, maybe every 2 or 3 months. The thing is, more often than not, the mother either came extremely late, 1 or 2 hours at least, or didn't come at all. When she came, there often was a huge tension between the two. It was obvious that they had some unresolved issues. Watching the girl wait for hours, even if it was clear that the mother wouldn't come on that day, always broke my heart. As a barkeeper, and since she was a regular, I tried my best to engage a conversation with her to distract her a little, but there's only so much you can do. Fun fact, years after I stopped working at that bar, I met her at a random party and we had a great evening/night together. She told me that she broke up with her mother though. It sucks being the child and trying to resolve issues with your parents because you want them to be a part of your life, but then they refuse to do any work on their part. Ugh. This gentleman in his mid-40s came to my restaurant frequently and would not order his drink until his wife got there. He would wait for a few minutes, then pull out a framed picture of a woman, set it on the table, and proceed to order his food and drink. He would talk to the framed picture and have dinner with her about once a week. I noticed him doing this often and told my coworker I thought it was cute he was having dinner with his late wife, and she replied, "Oh no, that's not his wife. He found that picture at Goodwill and has been in a relationship with it ever since. He told me that a long time ago. What did I expect from working right off the freeway in town? Very true story. No lie. They had us in the first half. Not gonna lie. I'm sorry, what? I mean, at first I was like, that's really sweet. You know, it's probably his late wife and they're having dinner together. He's obviously struggling without her. And then we find out he doesn't even know who this woman is in the photo. Like, sorry, what? Nah, it's a no from me. I was actually a hostess at the time and I was asked to take the table for a server. An old man came in asking for a table of 6 and he asked for 6 waters. I set up his table and put his order in. He said it was his birthday. He was there for about an hour or two and nobody showed up. It was really sad. He ended up tripping me like $30 and he said, sorry for the trouble. I still think about that guy. I hope he's doing okay. Ugh, I have no idea why I clicked on this thread. It's just making me super depressed. I hope that man's doing okay too. Ugh, guys, my actual heart just split into 2. That guy came in, ordered drinks for everyone and no one turned up. Oh, that is so sad. Why is there something so cute about old guys? Not in a weird way, just like when you see an elderly couple holding hands walking down the road. Ugh. They are adorable. But yeah, I hope that guy's okay too. Guy was dressed really nice. Says his date should be there soon and goes ahead and is seated. He orders a drink and 30 minutes pass by, then an hour, and another drink later. He started fidgeting with something and I noticed it was a ring. After an hour and a half, he asked for his check and muttered something about, there goes 2 years wasted and down the drain. He tipped 2 times his bill. Poor guy. Hold up. You're not about to tell me that this guy was going to propose and she didn't turn up. Stop, that means they must have been fairly serious as well. Nah, I don't believe it. I really don't believe it. Or am I misunderstanding this? Someone please confirm for me in the comments. I was working an evening shift and a relatively younger guy came in and waited for his date. She showed up and not even 10 minutes later, he got up and left and she was sat there crying. Patrons that are there to break up are also hard to witness. A woman came in 4 nights in a row just in case she got the day wrong. She'd sit at the bar wearing the same flowery dress every night and would hopefully look at the door every single time it opened. Left in tears the first 2 nights when we closed. The 3rd and 4th night she just stared vacantly at the door until we had to make sure she left. I never saw her again. I don't think any other staff did either, but we all felt really bad for her. She got a couple free drinks and apps. We didn't even care if it was a scam because she seemed so broken about it. A woman came in 4 nights in a row just in case she got the day wrong. I feel bad for her, but this is not normal behaviour. I wonder if she's okay. Yeah, hate to break it to you, but that is kinda strange. Like, in a way, it's kind of sweet, but also kind of stalkerish vibes. Do you know what I mean? I was a server for 5 years, and the most heartbreaking experience I had was an older woman. Probably in her 60s, was waiting for her grandson to come meet her for lunch. When I greeted her at the table, she was very excited, so I assumed she didn't see him much. As time went by, no one showed up, so she decided to order. Towards the end of her meal, no one had shown up, so it being a slow shift, me and my girlfriend, we worked together at the same restaurant, which is where we met, decided to just talk with her for a little bit and give her some company. We both felt so sad for this sweet old lady, but we could tell that such a simple act of kindness made her day. Shame on that grandson. Anyone who stands up their own grandma is an ungrateful punk. Ugh, yes, shame on that grandson. What are you playing at? Your little nan's waiting in there for you. Guys, I think we've discovered that I have a thing for old people. Not like a thing, just like, oh, you are so cute and sweet, I want to hug you. Place I used to work at had a man come in every night for a week, wait for a few hours, order food and drink, then leave with no one showing up. Later learned he was just trying to cope with his wife's death, believing that she'd arrived to greet him at the restaurant where they had their first date. Oh, I don't think I can cope with any more of these stories, I really don't. In a strange and not so sad way, that location may have allowed him to feel closer to her, and that was good enough. Not a waiter, but to cheer this thread up, I waited an hour and a half for my date to show once. I ended up sitting texting my friends, fed up, but kept telling myself, 5 more minutes, 5 more minutes. Just as I was about to give up, she showed. She explained she was a nurse on a mental health ward and one of her young people had gone into crisis. She'd been stressing the whole time. Anyway, we've been married 10 years in Feb. Sometimes it's worth the wait. Do you know what, guys? This is just what we needed. We needed that positive twist. Just to give us some hope, a slight glimpse of hope. Because I don't know about you lot, but I was literally sat here trying to cry. I was literally trying to cry at how sad these all are. I'm not a waiter, but I set up a joint party for my son and my nephew who have the same birthday. His stepmom decided not to bring him to his own party. The boys were born on the same day, 3 years apart. I set up a pizza party with the family and joint friends. His dad was working and the stepmom just decided not to bring him. Long before cell phones. Not the wait staff, but the waiter. I had set an OkCupid date at this nice coffee shop in Brooklyn. I get there, and I know the barista from college. I'm the only person in the shop at this time, so we talk a little, awkwardly. Gradually, other customers arrive, so she attends to them and I attend to my phone. It gets to the point where my date is 20 minutes late and hasn't been responding to my messages asking about an ETA. I'm sweating profusely. I'm so embarrassed that I'm probably being stood up in front of someone who I had several classes with years prior and knows most of my friends. I feel so humiliated. Then my date walks in, stands there for a moment, and walks right back out the door. Barista. Was that her? Me. Yup, barista. What a That comment made things slightly better. What? Why? That's evil. Sorry for that accent there, guys. I know it wasn't a general Brooklyn accent, but I was just trying to get into character, okay? Give me some credit. But still, this girl, like, she knows how to make someone feel like a speck of dirt on the bottom of your shoe. Come on. She walks in, takes one look at the guy, and she's like, "You're not a bit of me, love. I'm out of here." Like, come on, that is rude. Not a waiter, but was out with my girlfriend and we were seated next to a date. Guy was clearly trying to engage with the girl, but the girl kept looking at her phone disinterested. Guy initiated all of the conversations, only to be met with one-word answers. He ordered a lot of food. It's a dessert place, so a lot of small meals. And then the girl suddenly took her bag and left. He banged the table after about paying and just left with the food untouched. Everyone in the vicinity, including the waiters, were visibly shocked. I felt so bad for the guy. She sounds like an awful person. I used to work birthdays at a science museum. So, one weekend, the birthday family arrives. I escort them back to their room as usual and start talking with the mum about how she wants things to go, setting up the room, etc. She mentions that they just moved here and her son doesn't have many friends yet. So they invited one cousin about their son's age, and then just invited the kid's entire second grade class to the party. An hour goes by and the little cousin has shown up, but nobody else. The little dude invited every kid in his class, and not one of them showed up. Now, to be honest, the birthday boy himself didn't seem that concerned. He and his cousin were happily playing with each other the whole time. I just don't think he was really that warmed up to the kids in his class to begin with. But the mum was heartbroken. She'd set this party up for her son, had bought a birthday package that included a private room, general admission for all guests, and me taking a duo of liquid nitrogen to the room and making ice cream for the party. She had high hopes for this, and nobody showed. And she was in tears. And she asked me to go out to the museum and just invite random kids into her son's birthday party, just so that there would be at least some other kids for him to play with. And this is the part that I'll never forget. We found a half dozen kids who were interested in coming to the party, and the mum was very grateful to them. But word also got out to the staff, and the staff absolutely rallied around this kid. Other employees showed up to sing him happy birthday. Some staffers went to the gift shop to buy him gifts. One of my managers got them family vouchers for future admission. We have a mascot, a robot, who will walk around and play with guests, and he showed up to the party with some gifts from our gift shop. I brought down the materials for making a couple of different types of homemade slime and made slime with the kids. One of my co-workers, one of the smartest and kindest people I've ever met, spoke with the mum about the son's interests and discovers the birthday boy is a fan of the Avengers. So he goes back to where we have a laser etcher on display and comes back with a wood burning that is a picture of the Avengers wishing the son happy birthday. By the end of the party, the mum was in tears again, but for a very different reason. A few days later, she sent us the sweetest letter about how much it all meant to her. I worked 3 to 5 birthdays a weekend, every weekend for about 5 years, and they were always fun. But that was the absolute best day at work I've ever had. Once at my shift, I saw a really shy guy. You could see that he was on a budget, but oh my God, he was so trying so hard and looked so excited about the upcoming date. He brought 1 rose and asked what he can purchase on €10 to make this evening beautiful. My heart melted so much that I offered him for free 2 glasses of wine and a dessert. I was a manager. We put on a table some candles, and so he was sitting there with a big smile waiting for his date to come, but she never came. He waited like 2 hours, nervously checking on his phone. When he left, he gave this rose to me and thanked for kindness towards him. He was so broke. So was my heart about this situation. Not gonna lie, this almost made me cry. We had a 21st birthday party booked for 20. The family showed up early with a few friends. They had a few drinks and let the staff know some of the party were running late, half an hour in. When the late people were supposed to arrive, 2 friends left. An hour went by and the birthday group ordered, got their starters, and told the service staff some more people were coming. About 2 hours in, the mother said to just bring the mains out. It was so sad. I felt so bad for them, being stood up by 14 people, and the 2 friends who did show up didn't even eat. Oh, wow. Imagine that. You would be gutted, wouldn't you? And the 2 people that left, surely you'd think they'd have the decency to just stay and eat, just out of purely feeling so bad for the hosts. That is tragic. Years ago when I was bartendering, a man showed up in the early afternoon and told me that he was waiting on someone, and when I asked, He told me that it was his ex-wife and that they were celebrating that day. Now that was something that I wasn't about to dig into, so I just went on with my work. But once she arrived, they seemed remarkably friendly with each other and started ordering the works. Steaks, expensive drinks, appetizers that they only took a bite or two of, and multiple desserts. Towards the end of the meal, while chatting with two of them, I made the mistake of asking what they were celebrating. They told me that it was the birthday of their son who passed away, and every year they get together despite their divorce to celebrate him, order all of his favourite food, and drink all of his favourite drinks. They got a bit misty-eyed, but this seemed like a therapeutic experience for them. I, on the other hand, had to take 5 in the walk-in freezer to have a little cry afterwards. Not a waiter, but a patron at the restaurant. My girlfriend had taken me out to this local niche-type restaurant. One of the ones that was the type where you could get vintage old games and stuff to play with whilst you wait for your food. As we get in and seated, a young man around my age at the time, I think around 18 or 20, comes in holding a nice bunch of flowers, and he's dressed really nice with the hair done up and everything. It clearly took him a lot of preparation. So me and my girlfriend order and talk and enjoy the evening, and we realise that this guy's still alone. After an hour we have our food and are eating, but he's still sitting there drinking a soda and checking his phone. Then the door, then his phone, every 5 minutes. This went on for the whole 2 hours-ish that we were there. It became obvious by his increasing anxiety and glum look that he must have known he was stood up, but either couldn't accept it yet, or was still desperately holding out hope. Me and my girlfriend felt so bad for him that when he paid our bill, we gave the waitress extra money to send him a cheesecake. Waitress ended up giving him 2 just because she felt bad as well. To this day, it still sticks with me seeing that poor kid go through that. And it boggles my mind because the guy wasn't bad looking. There wasn't anything apparently wrong with him. Not that it would justify it if there was. It just adds to the confusion. People can be really crappy sometimes. We gave the waitress extra money to send him a cheesecake. That's nice. Waitress ended up giving him 2. That's just rubbing salt in the wounds. Have a cheesecake on the house. And one for your date. Oh crap, right. A few years ago, I took myself to a movie and dinner. It was the weekend before Valentine's Day. At the time, I had a warehouse gig, and that day my step counter was at 7.9 kilometers. Being exhausted, I just sort of plopped down, ordered quietly, sipped a beer, and derped around on my phone. I must have looked like I was on the verge of tears. In reality, I'd been rear-ended at a red light the week before and just hurt all over. Server comped my cheesecake, smiled politely, and quietly remarked, "Honey, it's going to be okay." Until that point, I wasn't sad to be alone, but after that, I was fighting tears all the way home. A 6-year-old boy came every day with his older brother at lunchtime, and for almost a month, they ordered 3 plates of food and always left 1. When I attended to them, the boy told his older brother to ask his mother for lunch because she was already arriving, but their mother never came. The boy's older brother asked me to give the food to someone who needed it when they left, and he told me that his mother had died and that he did not know how to explain to his little brother that his mother was not coming back, but that this cafeteria was the last place where she'd taken her little brother to eat, and that is why the boy believed that she would return for the dinner. That's enough for today. Yep, I agree. This is just getting worse and worse. I was really happy when this started. Now I'm like slowly falling down a ladder of depression. I was the sad schmuck on December 23rd, 2019. I'd set up a date with an amazing girl from Tinder. We had a lot in common, very attractive, and she lived close by. We agreed over Snapchat to meet at Red Robin's in the area for our first date, even though she'd be a little late. I got to the restaurant on time because I had no idea what a little late meant, and got a table with a view of the door and started waiting. The first 15 minutes passed with me excitedly telling the waitress I was expecting someone and wouldn't be ordering yet. The next 15 minutes passed with me openly staring at the door, sitting up whenever someone would walk in. After 45 minutes, the waitress asked if I wanted anything, and I told her I was still waiting while I watched the door anxiously. At 1 hour, I was planning on leaving soon and swinging by Target on my way home. I realised I hadn't given this girl my number, and I didn't have data, so we had no way of communicating. 15 minutes later, I was about to muster up the courage to leave, when 2 waitresses that had stopped by previously came to tell me they felt so sad and wanted to buy me a milkshake. I thanked them, but then told them I'd lost my appetite, and half-heartedly joked that this wouldn't even be the worst thing that happened to me today. My childhood dog had been put down earlier that morning, and I'd spent the hours before the date digging her grave. I told one of the waitresses, JC, whose kindness I will always remember, that I had no way of communicating with my date without Wi-Fi, to which she responded by giving me her hotspot password. I connected as fast as I could and opened Snapchat to find dozens of messages from my date, explaining how her only good pants were locked in the dryer and if I minded that she showed up in sweats. I sent her my number and told her I'd be glad if she showed up at all. A few minutes later, she walked in and explained that she'd been in the parking lot for the past 15 minutes not getting a response from me, thinking that I'd stood her up, and was about to leave when she got my text. We're still grateful to the waitress JC for helping us get together. Gotta get that data plan, bro. Mint Sim is like 300 for a year. I had a regular who would always come in with his wife. One day, he sat in my section and I noticed his wife wasn't with him. I asked, "Where's your wife today?" He replied, "She's in heaven waiting for me." Immediately, I died inside. I think I would have gone white. flopped on the bench and started crying. All those deep breaths you take when you want to cry but you try to get yourself together at the same time. Ducking heck. I would have been a wreck. Not a waiter here. On my 18th birthday, this girl invited me out to drink with her friends because all of mine were too young to drink. I said no at first, but they insisted, so I went along. Got there when they said they would. Ended up waiting at the bar 2 hours before they showed up. Had a short introduction and then they went off to the bathroom. One of her friends came back out and told me that she wanted me to leave. It really hurt, but I didn't see the point of arguing. Worst part was, when I got home, I found out she was spreading lies that I'd stalked her to the bar and told all our mutual friends. One heck of an 18th birthday. Honestly, some people can be so mean. Like, come on, what was the actual point in doing that? Like, what are you possibly gaining from doing that? Honestly, poor guy. Not a waiter, but this happened to me. I went speed dating, turned up to the venue to find it very quiet. Barely anyone was there. The event was on the second floor, so I got a pint for the time being and sat down and waited for people to turn up. I tried to go up to the second floor, only to find that it had been closed off. Noticing my confusion, the barman asked if I was there for speed dating. I said yes. He told me it was cancelled. I didn't get an email about this, nothing. So I sat there, dressed up and alone. I finished my pint and went home. Dressed up and alone. I finished my pint and went home. That, for some reason, hits hard. I'm not a waiter, but once, my friend and I were out at a restaurant celebrating our new apartment. There were some people sitting next to us that were on a Tinder date. The girl kept asking the guy questions about what was apparently on his profile, and he kept saying he didn't do that or just put that on there to get someone to like him. She seemed so defeated. At one point, he got up without saying anything, and when she asked where he was going, he ignored her. Came back about 5 minutes later when this girl looks like she's on the verge of tears. She asks where he went, and he just said bathroom and went back to eating. It was awkward to witness. Frick that dude. Okay, I'm getting one vibe here and one vibe only. That guy is an F-boy. Absolute F-boy. He's there for one thing, girl. Get out of there. I'm not a waiter, but I've got one heck of a story. I was going for a friend's party at a restaurant, and when I got there was a kid sitting by the door. He was also coming to the party. When I told the waiters I was there for the party as well, they called my friend and he identified me immediately, but had never seen the kid before. As it turned out, his friend who invited him to the party had the party days before and gave him the wrong date. We felt bad for the kid, so we let him join our party. That day, I made a new friend. Reminds me of an event a group my friend was in held. They skied and held a single skiing event. They put up flyers and sent notices out. One of the people who showed up that morning was a 13-year-old kid who wanted to try skiing. He said everyone was nice to the kid, and they all made sure he had a good day his first time on the mountain. Please like and subscribe if you've made it this far. I hope you'll enjoy the rest of this video, and have a wonderful day. Happened to my friend. She was a hostess at a restaurant and sat this old lady at a table while she was waiting for her friend. She stayed there for a few hours, asking every now and then if her friend had showed up. My friend was heartbroken and told this to her co-worker who was working the other side of the restaurant. Turns out, her co-worker also had an old lady alone at a table who'd been waiting patiently for her friend. The ladies got a chance to chat a bit before they left, so it was a happy ending at least. Thank God for at least one happy ending in this thread. Not a server anymore, or at the time, but I still remember this one like 20 years later. My D&D group was currently that week without a place to game, so we went to the local Denny's. We told the waitress that we would be there for about 6 hours. Yes, we tipped her very well for camping that long. Anyway, about an hour into our session, this guy comes in and sits at a two-top in clear view of me. He sets a single rose on the table and sits down. When the waitress took his drink order, he was all smiles. Nothing really dramatic happens, but over the next 4 hours or so, I just watch his body language change. He checks his phone like every 2 or 3 minutes, never gets a call, never seems to get or send a text. Finally, after the 4 hours is up, he just gets up, leaves a 20 on the table. He only ordered a soft drink as far as I could tell, and just walks out. No idea why, but that image of the table, a single drink, the tip, and the abandoned rose stayed with me all my life. For your own sanity, you never wait more than 20 minutes if she isn't responding to calls or messages. Okay, this story did not happen to me, but to my friend. My friend was a manager, still is, at a pretty fancy restaurant. She was working during Valentine's Day. A guy walks in, pretty nicely dressed, but not too nicely, kind of nervous. He's walked into a table for 2. Since it was Valentine's, the restaurant did its best to give off a romantic atmosphere. Roses on the table, love-themed dessert, etc. The guy orders a water and starts to wait. When the waiter tries to take his order, he tells them he's waiting for someone. He waits for an hour, then 2, and then 3. Each time spent checking his phone, trying to call someone. After a while, my friend goes to talk to him. This guy'd lost his girlfriend of 6 years. He was 24 at the time, 2 years ago, and it was his first date ever since. After that, she talked to him a bit more about him how life is, etc., etc. Turns out they had quite a bit in common, so they exchanged contact. A lot happened afterward, but they've been happily married for 2 years now. He's now 30 and she's 28. He was in it for the long con of free desserts. Wow, what a love story. That is one to tell your grandkids. And on Valentine's Day. How sweet. Not my story, but my sister's. There was a boy in my niece's class, I think 3rd or 4th grade. Kind of chubby, quiet kid. He invited people to his birthday party. My sister made my niece go to be polite. Luckily she did, because only my niece went from the classroom. His mother was so happy she went. My sister felt so bad for him. But I think he was just happy one person came to his party. So when my niece had her birthday party at a skating rink, she invited him too. He was ecstatic. I met the boy. Very good kid, and he had a blast at her party. I think some of the kids wanted to go to his party, but the parents were just too lazy. Seriously, parents, imagine if that was your kid's party. I make my son go to every birthday party, and all the kids, including my son, love it. My mum was embarrassed to be poor and didn't have money for other kids' gifts, but instead of being creative or offering to help, she just said I wasn't allowed to go to other kids' birthday parties. Luckily, had a number of other things to keep me from becoming a weird, maladjusted kid/adult. Not a waiter, but I witnessed a sad experience in a New York restaurant, and it's worth sharing here. A lady sitting by herself at the table next to me just stared straight ahead and with tears in her eyes. When I asked her if she was okay, she told me that her husband had recently died, and this was her first time out to a restaurant on her own. She said she had a pair of concert tickets for a performance at Lincoln Center they'd planned to attend, but would now be going alone. Another first since her husband passed. When I told her that I was a musician, she asked if I'd like her extra ticket. So we went together and had a great time. After the concert, we even went out for dessert and a nightcap. She was delightful. I'll forever be grateful for the opportunity in that crowded restaurant to speak to someone who needed companionship and understanding. Had a lady, probably in her late 70s, early 80s, come in with her daughter for a birthday dinner. They got there early and set up some small decorations on the table, a bouquet or two, some balloons. They waited for over an hour and a half before they told me that they guessed no one was coming, and they'd go ahead and order. They'd invited over a dozen people, and no one even called. I told the lady that the people she invited were missing out, and we chatted for a bit. I tried to make sure that I checked in on her a lot, made small talk, cracked a few dad jokes, and while she was very sweet, you could tell she was disappointed. I mean, at her age, who knows how many birthdays you've left? At that point in your life, I feel like family and friends would be the most important thing to you. They finished, thanked me, left a tip, and departed. Later that evening, about 5 hours later, 2 young men, about 20 to 25, showed up and asked if the such and such birthday party had been seated yet. I told them they'd missed a fun dinner and that it ended hours ago. They didn't seem to care and just ambled out. Later that evening, about 5 hours later, 2 young men, about 20 to 25, showed up and asked if the such and such birthday party had been seated yet. I told them they'd missed out on a fun dinner and that it ended hours ago. They didn't seem to care and just ambled out. That kind of sounds like they honestly got the time they were supposed to show up wrong. They had a reservation for 12 people. It was the girl's 17th birthday and she arrives first with her boyfriend. Her dad comes a few minutes later. The 3 of them wait about 45 minutes and decide to just order. They eat and are about to leave when the rest of her family shows up drunk. They make a scene about how they weren't hungry and had to show up so nobody would be mad at them for not coming, eat her cake, and leave. The birthday girl was crying and her dad and boyfriend were trying to console her. They sound like my in-laws. This happened years ago when I was a bartender. I worked at a fairly high-end restaurant. Dress code, but not too uptight. An older gentleman, who I'd seen multiple times before, sits down at the end of the bar and tells me what he's drinking, and then also orders a second drink for his wife, who's supposed to be meeting him there. 30 minutes go by, and he's on his second drink, while his wife still hasn't arrived. He's looking around behind his shoulder at the door and calling on his phone to no avail. Another 45 minutes passes, and he finishes his wife's drinks for her, then closes the tab. A couple weeks go by, and this man comes into the restaurant again. He has a bunch of people with him who range from old age to teens. They all look sad and are all dressed up in black. His wife wasn't in the group with them. He orders a drink for himself and another for his wife. He closes the tab, then walks back to the front of the restaurant by the hostess stand with his drink, but left his wife's drink behind. I was kind of busy at the time, so I didn't think much of it in the moment. I later found out through one of the hostesses, no idea how she found out, that he and his family were there after the funeral of a family member who died a couple weeks prior. I did the mental calculations, and it seemed to fall in the exact same time frame that he'd been sitting at the bar alone, waiting for his wife. Now, I know that funerals usually don't take weeks to complete once a person dies, so this could have all been coincidental, but it seemed a little too perfect of a coincidence. It depends. Sometimes, especially when there's a cremation, the memorial service may be sometime later. Guys, I'd probably say out of all of these stories, and there's been a few, there's literally been like 3 or 4 positive ones. I don't think my heart can take any more of this. I worked at Tim Hortons over 25 years ago. One day, an old man came in by himself and requested a cake for a birthday. He asked that we write "Happy Birthday, Angel" on it. When it was ready to come to the counter to pay for it, flashed a huge smile and said, "It's my birthday, I'm Angel." I will never forget Angel buying himself a birthday cake. This is what I'm talking about. This is what we need, more of these stories. By the way, I really rate that from you, Angel. We all need that kind of self-love in our lives. Right, guys? Let's all buy ourselves our own birthday cakes this year. Why not? My co-workers just told me this story last week and I cried. I work at a semi-classy seafood restaurant in Southeast Michigan, and the host, who's been working there for a long time, said she had the sweetest old man who came with a single rose and vase, set it up himself and ordered a bottle of champagne, sitting by the table in a chiller and everything, and he just waited for a date that never showed. Literally cried when she told me this. Another one they had was the guy who set up the reservation called to cancel it the day of and asked the host to please inform his date. They told him they obviously didn't have her number and he just hung up. The woman showed up dressed to the nine and was stunning, apparently. His loss. I had a really bad fight with my ex following a meal at a semi-classy seafood restaurant in Southeast Michigan several years ago, and I would have rather had that fight than be the poor guy who gets stood up. Not my story. Happened to my roommate. He worked at an old diner that had a fair amount of veterans as regulars. There was one group that came in and shared a meal every 3 months and caught up with each other's lives. Been doing it since they got back from serving together in the Korean War. Over the years, the group had gotten smaller as some passed on. By the time my roommate started working there, the group was down to 3, then down to 2 by the end of that year. The last 2 kept coming back for over a year until one day, the last guy came in and after a few cups of coffee said, "I guess I'm all that's left." He never did come back as far as my roommate remembers. Ugh, this happened to a good friend. He's one of just 2 left of his company of 20. They served in Iraq together. They're all only 40 or 44 if they were still alive. One of them only passed 2 weeks ago. It's devastating. This is similar. A man in his 80s used to come in on his own every night, without fail. Always ordered the same thing, was genuinely lovely to the staff. It turned out his wife had died a few years previously, and coming to the restaurant and talking to waiters was the only social interaction he had all day. We ended up giving him free meals every day just so we would keep coming. I had a dude at my bar waiting for a Tinder date. It had been like 15 minutes and a girl walks in. He perked up and smiled. He then proceeded to watch her, I can only assume very drunk self, go over to another guy of a completely different race and seemed so excited to meet him. She realised her mistake and quickly looked around to see her actual date. Most awkward Tinder date I've ever served. No way, that is actually mad. She must have been steaming to do that. Absolutely steaming. That is funny though, that's like something you see on TV. I was in a nightclub famous for having girl ex-workers, and there was this guy with 2 women, one in each of his sides. Then his wife came in, dressed as a hooker, got herself a glass cup and shattered it in his head. I never saw that much blood and yelling. But the guy was okay, kinda. It was like a big Mexican soap opera. He kinda deserved it though. English is not my first language, so sorry if I sound offensive. The waiter here. This was at my first job when I was maybe 16 or 17 and didn't have many friends. I'd been asked by co-workers to go bowling one afternoon. I was excited to go as I didn't really get to hang out with anyone very much, and my crush was the one who asked me to go. I got the details from my crush via text and got to the bowling alley a little early to make sure I had the right place. I headed in and realised I was the first one there. Over the next hour, I called each person who'd said they were going and each one sent me to voicemail. I'm pretty sure the alley staff thought I was being sketchy as heck too. I ended up going home and just never brought it up at work, even though I knew my manager would have gone off on the staff for doing that to me. Dude had a soft spot for me and told me I was like the kid he never had. He was a really kind man. Server here. As many stories have said, a mum made a reservation for 20, I believe for her kid's birthday. The mum arrived an hour early and we gave her the entire back section so she could decorate it however she wanted. She did a lot. Like, she really went all out for her kid, which me and my co-workers thought was the sweetest thing ever. Come party time at 2 p.m. and no one comes. More time goes by and nothing. By 3 p.m, nothing. The mum waits until 4 and comes to us crying that no one showed up. Obviously heartbroken. My manager says to them, "You guys order as much as you want and we'll make you the biggest birthday dessert for your son." They had a giant feast, and while they were doing this, me and my co-workers made him a custom birthday card with all of our names on it. We had an artist that worked there, so she drew him a bunch of Disney things on the card and laminated it. The most interesting part about this happened after with me. The kid was kinda quiet, and he had a Switch that his mum gave to him as a present. Something about this kid reminded me of me as a kid, so I went up to their table and asked them how everything was. They were both in a better mood and spirits, and I started talking to the kid about video games and stuff for like 20 minutes. I found out later that he loves anime, more specifically Naruto. So we started talking about that, and I'm not sure if he knew anyone else that liked Naruto, but this kid lit up like, I was the first person he's talked to about the show. It was the most heartwarming thing to ever happen to me. The whole entire time, his mum was like, "You actually understand what he says about the show?" So obviously the kid talked to his mum about it, but she had no idea what he was talking about. At some point, the mother started crying because she was so happy that her kid had someone to talk to about his interests. As they were leaving, I went to my locker and got my car keys because I had a Naruto keychain on them. I took it off and I gave it to him. And I said, "Happy birthday." And this kid says this was the best birthday ever to his mum. And he said that he wanted to come back and eat at my restaurant soon. Most heartwarming thing that's ever happened to me in my entire life. I don't know what happened to me after they left, but I just started crying from being overwhelmed with what happened. It still brings a tear to my eye anytime I think about it. Long story short, Mum reserved the party of 20 for Son's birthday. No one showed. My manager gave them a giant feast. I talked to the kid about video games and Naruto, and his day was made. Not me, but my mum. So basically, there's this sweet old man that comes down to the restaurant that my mum works at as a waitress. And it's usually him and his wife, and sometimes their grandson. But anyways, one day, the man came in with his daughter, and they told my mum that the wife had passed away. Then a couple of days later, the daughter had started to show up regularly with the old man. And the daughter, one day before they ate, had told my mum that the old man had Alzheimer's and was starting to forget stuff here and there, but still remembered the important things. But he forgot about the wife's passing. So whenever they eat, he would wait for his wife to come, but the daughter would have to remind him that she wasn't feeling good. So every day they come, they ate their food and had a good time. But at the end of it, he would ask for the cake of the day whenever there's lemon cake, because she loved the lemon cake. I don't know how my mum does it, but it must be so hard to do all of this without crying. I'm crying. Thanks for watching. Like and subscribe for more videos coming daily.